Also known as Wunderkammer, wonder rooms, and even as an early iteration of a museum, a curiosity cabinet was a wooden case filled with a variety of uncommon objects. They were often constructed of wood with glass paneling or an open design that showcased the wondrous things inside. In 1565, a Flemish physician and curator known as Samuel van Quiccheberg wrote a little book titled Inscriptiones vel Titvli, Theatri, Amplissimi. While this book is only 64 pages long, it would have been invaluable to the private collector, as it provided a way to organize your collection and a rationale for why we collect. In his book, van Quiccheberg defines 5 different categories that most collections can be divided into. Naturalia is a category that covers anything that comes from nature. So any animal teeth, talons, feathers, shells, drawings of various fungi or plants, that all falls into this category. SCIENTIFICA covers any mechanical instruments or illustrations. ARTIFICALIA is anything that is historically man-made. A lot of historic items would generally fall into this, such as Roman coins or medieval armor. EXOTICA covers objects that come from different lands, so a lot of travelers would bring trinkets and things back from their journeys. And for anything that didn't fit into those previous 4 categories, you have MIRABILIA, which is a term associated with anything that sparks wonder. Over the years, and even now, there are plenty of different papers and books and guides that can help you divide a collection into different categories, and each of those categories has their own subcategories. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of curiosity cabinets, I found this one to be very helpful. Ultimately, there is no limit to what you can find in a curiosity cabinet. In this type of video, I would usually provide a date for the world's first curiosity cabinet and maybe provide who constructed it, where it was made, who owned it, what it was filled with, but it's not realistically possible with this sort of thing. Because you see, even the definition of a curiosity cabinet is somewhat vague. For example, you would sometimes have a collection spread out through various rooms of somebody's house, and that would still be referred to as a curiosity cabinet. I think it's also somewhat impossible for a bit more of a philosophical reason. As humans, I think, since the day that we first discovered tools, have been collecting things. Just as when we were children and you wanted to collect seashells from the beach or shiny rocks that you found on the playground, I think humans have always been collecting, so trying to pin a date on the very first collection ever is a bit of a fool's errand. Museums, for example, have existed for thousands of years. You have ancient Greek and Roman museums, although some other people might refer to the Ashmolean or the Louvre as the first ever museum, which I don't think is entirely accurate, but I'll take that up with them later. If we really want to try and look at one of the earliest curiosity cabinets, we can, however, look to Tradescants' Ark, or otherwise known as the Musaeum Tradescantianum. This cabinet of curiosities was originally collected by John Tradescant in the 17th century in England. After the death of John Tradescant, the collection changed hands a few times before it was eventually donated to Oxford University. From there, it would go on to form the foundational collection of the Ashmolean Museum. One thing I want to make really clear early on in this video is that a lot of big museums today, like the Louvre, the British Museum, a lot of those started as private collections, many of which started as curiosity cabinets. And while Tradescants' Ark is one of the earliest curiosity cabinets that we can definitively kind of point to, there are depictions and rumors of curiosity cabinets that have existed earlier, suggesting that it is definitely not the first. These cabinets gained popularity in the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe, as there was a new world on the horizon and there were plenty of unseen wonders to explore and share with your neighbors. Biologists, doctors, artists, explorers were the prime suppliers for curiosity cabinets at the time. In fact, physicians and scientists actually had a practical use for having a curiosity cabinet in their home, as they had a place to store specimens and they could actually re-examine them. They didn't need to go to a university or to go to some other institution. They could just have them in their home and they could examine them whenever they needed to. Over the years, the curiosity cabinet served a variety of different functions in a household. It was one thing to simply have a very nicely made cabinet in one corner of your large drawing room, but it was another thing to fill it as well. It was also a way of displaying one's accomplishments. If you were an explorer, it was a perfect place to show off all of the cool stuff you got on your trip to India. And as I mentioned before, scientists and doctors found them particularly useful just as a way to store their items. And for anyone who they happened to have over as a guest who wasn't in their same field of study, it probably looked quite interesting, and it was a way for them to share their knowledge and show off a little bit. And that ties into what I think is the most common use of these cabinets, which was that it provided entertainment. It was a conversation starter, a discussion piece. Why do you have this in your living room? How did you come across all of these different things? It was a way for you to show off your wealth and your connections. One thing I want to mention, because you can't talk about museums without talking about colonialism, is that it should be no surprise to you that it wasn't just biological samples and trinkets that they were bringing back from these various far-off countries. Various cultural artifacts and pieces of heritage were plundered and brought back for the entertainment and conversation pieces of many wealthy Europeans. Austrian and Holy Roman Emperor Francis II had a particular interest in ethnology, and as a result, his Kunstkammern, or curiosity cabinet, contained a number of items from Mexico, including a feathered headdress which he believed originally belonged to Montezuma. However, it was more likely to have belonged to a priest. And to me, this is a prime example of the paradox of the curiosity cabinet, as so often things were collected with the intent to be able to learn from the item. However, a lot of the time, people didn't even know what the original purpose of an object or even the species of an animal that they collected a sample from was in the first place. So as time went by, eventually the owners of these private collections passed on, and it became a matter of what do we do with all of this stuff that these private collectors have left behind. A lot of these collections would be divided amongst family or be sold in estates to various individuals. However, there were a handful that went on to become the nucleus of a number of different museum institutions that we actually still have standing today. As I mentioned before, Tradescants Ark would eventually go on to become the Ashmolean Museum. Sir Hans Sloane's collection would eventually go on to become the British Museum, where a curiosity cabinet or a Wunderkammer would encourage touch and examining things up close and personal by everybody who happened to have the opportunity to come and see a collection. Museums provided a more orderly approach and also allowed more general members of the public to enjoy a collection. These collections have also over the years in general moved away from being just for the wealthy and are now for the general public. Nowadays, the definition of a curiosity cabinet is even broader than what it was originally, which was already pretty broad, in my opinion. Some have even described YouTube as being its own sort of curiosity cabinet. Nowadays, you can find many people have their own curiosity cabinets in their homes, and many of them still have the same sort of things today as they would have had in a curiosity cabinet 100 years ago. As a self-proclaimed maximalist, I like to live amongst my sentimental and aesthetic trinkets. Compared to historical cabinets, however, today you can find an even broader range of items that would not have existed 100 or 200 years ago. For example, I don't think that John Tradescant would have had Pokemon cards or anime figurines in his curiosity cabinet, although I so wish that he did. I wonder what category Samuel von Quiccheberg would put anime figurines in.
Haven't you seen the show? Captain Cabinets, trapped in cabinets.
Can he get out? Will he get out? 'Cause he will, Captain. Yes, I have seen it.